Strange rules for your front yard in Australia you didn't know. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to uncover some of the weirdest and most surprising rules about what you can and cannot do in your very own front yard here in Australia. Yes, you might think that since it's your property you can plant whatever you like, tall trees, bright flowers, or even a jungle of exotic plants. But the truth is that's not always the case. Councils, state laws, and even neighborhood rules sometimes step in and decide what your front yard should look like. And trust me, some of these rules will surprise you. So stick around until the end, and if you find this interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below if you've ever had a funny or frustrating experience with front yard rules in your suburb. Let's dive right into it. When most people buy a home in Australia, the dream is simple. A cozy house, a backyard for the kids or pets, and a front yard to make beautiful with your favorite plants and trees. But what many don't realize until much later is that front yards are not always a blank canvas for your imagination. Some councils and housing estates actually have rules about what you can plant, how tall your plants can grow, and even what colors your front garden should look like. Sounds strange, right? But these rules exist for reasons ranging from safety, to maintaining neighborhood character, to avoiding disputes between neighbors. One of the most surprising rules is about tall trees. You might love the idea of planting a giant gum tree in your front yard for shade, but local councils in some areas will actually stop you. Why? Because tall trees in the front yard can block streetlights, interfere with power lines, and even cause damage to footpaths and roads with their roots. Imagine planting a beautiful eucalyptus, only to get a notice from the council telling you it has to be cut down. That's a common story in many Australian suburbs. And speaking of trees, did you know that in some new housing estates, you're not even allowed to choose certain species of plants? Developers often set up landscaping guidelines that require you to stick to a list of approved trees and shrubs. For example, they might encourage natives like bottlebrush and grevilleas but ban exotic palms or fruit trees in the front yard. Why? Because they want the estate to have a cohesive look and avoid problems like fallen fruit attracting birds and pests. That might sound a bit controlling, but it's surprisingly common. Now here's a fun one. In some areas, front yard lawns are practically compulsory. Councils or estate developers sometimes require homeowners to maintain a neat green lawn in the front. If you decide to turn your front yard into a veggie patch or cover it all in gravel for easy maintenance, you could actually get into trouble. Yes, the war between perfect green lawn lovers and low-maintenance garden fans is real in Australia. Another weird rule has to do with driveways and visibility. If you're thinking of planting tall hedges, shrubs, or even placing large pots near your driveway entrance, you might be stopped. That's because councils often have strict rules about keeping sight lines clear so drivers can see pedestrians and cars when reversing. It makes sense from a safety perspective, but it means you can't always build that cozy, private green wall in front of your home. Now let's talk about fencing in trees. Many people assume that fences are fair game, but did you know that in some states, certain trees or hedges grown as living fences can count as a legal fence? And if your living hedge grows too high, you could face a complaint from neighbors under high hedge laws. In fact, there are official dispute resolution channels in Australia for neighbors who fight about tall hedges in the front yard. Imagine spending years growing a lush green hedge, only for your neighbor to file a complaint because it blocks their view of the street. Here's another odd one: heritage overlays. In suburbs with historic homes, councils sometimes enforce strict garden rules to keep the heritage character of the area. That means you may not be allowed to plant modern species, or you may be forced to use traditional styles of hedging, trees, and flower choices. Your neighbor might have a lovely old rose garden not because they love roses but because the council requires it. Some rules are about protecting nature. For example, if your front yard has a tree that's classified as significant under local law, you can't just chop it down or replace it with something else. You'll need council permission. In some cases, even pruning is regulated. These significant tree laws are meant to preserve the local ecosystem, but they often leave homeowners feeling like their own garden doesn't really belong to them. Now let's not forget about water restrictions. During drought periods in Australia, councils often introduce restrictions on watering gardens. That means you can't water your front yard whenever you feel like it. Sometimes you're only allowed to water with a hose at specific hours or use gray water. It may not be a permanent planting rule, but it definitely affects how lush your front yard can look. Another interesting thing is that some councils ban certain plants outright because they are considered invasive species. For instance, plants like agapanthus or privet might be on the banned list. Even if they look beautiful, you might be fined or told to remove them because they spread too aggressively and harm native plants. So the list of forbidden plants isn't just a garden magazine trend, it's a real rule with teeth. And then there's the debate about artificial turf. While some people love the low-maintenance, always green look of fake grass, not every council agrees. In fact, some neighborhoods discourage or even restrict artificial turf in the front yard because it can cause heat buildup and harm soil ecosystems. So if you thought fake grass was the perfect solution, you might need to check the fine print first. Front yard gardens are also sometimes limited by street tree rules. In many Australian suburbs, the strip of land between the footpath and the road is council property, not yours. That means you can't just plant your own trees or flowers there. In fact, if you remove or damage a council-planted tree in that strip, you can be fined heavily. This comes as a shock to many homeowners who assume that the nature strip is theirs to control. Even more surprising, some councils regulate the height of front yard retaining walls, garden beds, and decorative features. If you build a raised garden bed that's too tall, or place a large sculpture in your front yard, you might find yourself being asked to take it down. So what's the big picture here? The rules may sound strange or even frustrating, but they are usually about balancing private property rights with community safety, aesthetics, and environmental health. Australians are proud of their neighborhoods, and councils want to make sure that one person's unusual front yard doesn't become everyone else's headache. But let's not forget the human side of this. These rules often create funny stories. Imagine a neighbor calling the council because your lemon tree dropped fruit on their driveway. Or a developer telling you that your favorite palm tree doesn't match the aesthetic vision of the estate. Or a homeowner who tried to grow corn in the front yard, only to be told it's not appropriate for the streetscape. These stories may sound ridiculous, but they're real examples of how unusual front yard rules shape Australian life. So, the next time you think about planting a massive jacaranda tree or transforming your front yard into a tropical paradise, check the local rules first. It might save you a lot of hassle later. That's the reality of living in Australia. Your home is yours, but your front yard often has to follow a surprising set of rules. Some of them make sense, some feel outdated, and some are downright weird. What do you think? Have you ever been told you can't plant something in your own front yard? Or have you seen neighbors get into funny disputes about trees, hedges, or lawns? Share your stories in the comments, I'd love to hear them. And once again, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss more surprising stories about life in Australia.